Welcome to episode 3 of Reel to Reel, brought to you by the That's Effing Weird podcast network. Tonight we're on week 3, so Clark, my good buddy here, had to digest a film selected by me. The film I picked is coincidentally still from 1999. That we weren't stuck in that year, but that's where this film came from because he and I got talking about it, and he said he had never seen it, so I wanted to get his take on it. The film is Election. Election stars Reese Witherspoon and Matthew Broderick. They're kind of our two main ones. There's also Chris Klein, who you'd know from all the American Pie movies. A bunch of character actors you'd know, people that you might not know their names, but you've definitely seen their faces before. And fundamentally, it's about a high school overachiever. Now, yes, Clark, I realize there's a tiny bit more to it than that. And like I said, I can't wait to see what you have to say. For me, this movie is one that I saw in 1999. And at the time, I loved it because it tried to take down that person in high school that I always hated, that overachiever that seemed to get everything. There was never any consequences if there were bad behavior. And that person that just seemed like they were on a rail to success no matter what they did. It just didn't seem to matter. And this movie at least tried to take that person down a notch. Now, did it succeed? Getting to the end, it's kind of hard to tell. I think it could be one way or the other depending on your perspective. But I think without further ado, Clark, I think it's just time for us to get real.
Okay, and I can get real on this one. And I have to bring up a question. Actually, right out the gate, I will ask a question. So, for me, I went to a private Christian college preparatory school. So, not a humble brag here. It's not like it was a great time, but I did go to that. And my first question is, who was the overachiever that needed to be taken down? Is it the doofus jock that had everything given to him, or is it the workaholic Reese Witherspoon character who is like trying everything? And also her mom is a paralegal. It's not like she's like want for anything. In my mind, like one of her complaints in this movie is that like everything is given to the people. It's like, oh, this person, everything was given to them and they didn't have to work hard for anything. And it seems like, I mean, she worked hard, went to Georgetown, did all this stuff, but her mom was also a paralegal and all this. It just didn't seem like she was like given a short shake, if you want to say, like, that's the easiest way to say it. I went to like I said, having gone to a college preparatory school where a majority of the people were far more wealthy than my family and had like a lot more handed to them. And I knew where they were going after high school, what they were going to do, like what was going to be given to them. All they had to basically do was follow the rules and go to college and do the things. Like, you would think I would like Reese Witherspoon's character in this movie, but I don't like her at all. So I kind of want your opinion on who do you think is who do you actually think is being taken down here?
Well, I think that is the question that's answered by who's viewing the movie, to be perfectly honest.
Fair enough.
I think we all know the super hardworking overachiever, that person who is just absolutely stressed to the bone, but things always go well for. But then we also knew that high school jock who, no matter what they did, they just sort of coasted through and everything was easy. So I think it really depends. Now, yeah, functionally, I don't like her character either. And I like what she represents even less. At the same time, the character of Paul Metzler, I like what he represents on an equally small scale. So if there's a person I relate to most in this movie, it's probably Tammy Metzler. Tammy is the goddamn bomb. She is. And, you know, with the characters themselves, I honestly think this movie is more about just the human experience than it is really anything else. And I think how did you say it to me? You said it was about a bunch of shitty people making shitty decisions, and then they're surprised when the outcome is shitty. And it's like, I think you're absolutely right in that fact, but I don't think at the end, the human condition is a big piece of what's responsible for that. Now, let's say for the record right now, I don't approve of, I don't think you approve of, and I know That's Effing Weird does not approve of high school teachers sleeping with their students. Okay, that's just not acceptable on any level. You're in college and it's a college professor, go for it. It's part of the human experience. But in high school, not so much. But I think this does, from both the two teachers' perspectives and then the three students' perspectives, it shows you a bunch of different people that, for whatever reason, are not, quote unquote, satisfied with their place in life and are wanting something bigger. And it shows you those lengths you go to get to something bigger might not always be the right thing to do. But how in the moment it can seem like a good idea. And I think that's just kind of overall what I like about it. It shows people trying, and in a lot of these cases, it shows people failing, and it shows the outcome of it. And I don't think there's a lot of movies that do that anymore, where they show you. And granted, this movie is satire, right? So I mean, it's not meant to be taken too seriously, but at the same time, if you do this thing, this is the likely outcome. You're likely not going to live happily ever after. There's going to be a painful outcome, and I think it does a good job of showing that.
Yeah, first watch through on this movie. I messaged you halfway through it saying I can't picture the person who wrote the screenplay. And it was because in my mind, all I could think was, it almost like somebody watched American Beauty and said, "I can do that, but be more bitter." if that makes any sense to you, like that's what it felt like to me. I was just like, oh man, it's somebody who I guess graduated high school and maybe went through and like became a teacher, and then they just looked back and they were just like, I hated these people, and now and I hate my own marriage. I hate because everybody kind of is unnecessarily horny in this movie. And I don't understand why. I get that is a part of the human experience to, I guess, maybe be unhappy and maybe like want to venture out sexually. But like everyone in this movie has a sexual side story for no reason. Like even Paul, Chris Klein's character, like he's getting blown by Tammy's ex experimental girlfriend. like he didn't even need that. He's a doofus in this movie. Like if he's maybe possibly the most likable character, and he's supposed to be the character you want to hate the most. If your high school experience was hating the jock that had the rich parents and everything given to them, like he's actually kind of a lovable doofus who just kind of bumbles through this movie. And he's like, even his like speech for like president, he's just kind of like reading. He's like, Mr. McAllister said that I should do this, and I was like, he's a lovable doofus, and yet like he still gets he's just like, oh, I can't believe Lisa took me home and blew me. like
well, but that's the part for him where everything just comes easy and happens, and he can't believe it, right? He just can't believe it. But that's the adorable doofus. That's why he ends up being the most likable character. I mean, in terms of just personality, he's the most likable character. My favorite's always going to be Tammy, just because of her attitude. But I mean, in terms of, if you have to find somebody to sort of root for, if you've got to decide that you got to pick a winner in this thing, it's pretty easy to go with Paul Metzler. I mean, it's Paul Metzler or you Betzler, So it's pretty simple. Well, let's give the people that have never seen this movie a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So as we babble nonstop, at least there's something to follow along. So Election is a 1909 American, it's called a black comedy film. I don't know if we can use that term anymore. Probably not. So we'll call it dark comedy.
Comedy works.
Fair enough. Yeah. And it effectively revolves around an election for student body president at a high school. Um, Now, with you've got Matthew Broderick as our Mr. McAllister, and he's a very popular teacher in this school. And then you have Reese Witherspoon, who is Tracy Flick, and she's the overachiever that the teacher and most of the student body just don't really like. You know, she's got a few friends, but they're all student government AV types for the most part. And Tracy, initially at least, is running for student government president, and she's effectively running unopposed. Now enter Paul Metzler, the adorable doofus. Mr. McAllister is a little bit, call it off-put by the fact that she's running unchallenged. He doesn't really want her to win. So he inspires Paul to run for the student body president as well. And this effectively just infuriates Tracy Flick, and from there a lot of hijinks ensue. Now, I think one of the important things to know, at least about the characters when you're first getting to know what's happening, is that so at the school, Jim McAllister's best friend, and he's also a teacher there, his name is Dave Novotny, he was fired from his job and divorced by his wife Linda because he had a sexual relationship with Tracy. And it's pretty clear in the movie that Jim thinks that his buddy being fired and facing consequences was appropriate. He is really super resentful that nothing happened to Tracy. Now, in this day and age, and even back then, I don't know exactly what you'd do in that situation. I think it would be, like today, it would definitely be one person goes to prison, the other one goes to a therapist, right? So 25 years ago, I can't really tell you what the plan would have been. But one thing about the character of Tracy Flick as the movie goes on and you start to dislike her more and more, you do start to a little bit feel like, yeah, how come nothing bad happened to her? You know, how come she didn't have to change schools or something, you know? It plays into it, at least in my feelings of it, and I'm not, I don't want to play the predator victim game here because I understand that completely. But I think in this case, getting to know the character, it could be confusing as to who the predator actually was. And that's something that I felt like from the first time I watched the movie. It's like, I don't think he lured her in. I think she lured him in. But that kind of is what it is. We could discuss that all night, so let's just not. Additionally, Paul's younger sister Tammy gets dumped by her, I guess that you called experimental girlfriend Lisa, and then Lisa becomes Paul's girlfriend and his campaign manager. So Tammy decides to go all Ross Perot on us and run as a third-party candidate, and basically says that all this student government is a sham and there's no reason to do it, and vote or don't, who gives a shit, and if I win, I'm just going to dismantle all this anyway, so it doesn't really matter, is kind of what that's kind of her, call it her campaign speech, and the result of that is she ends up getting suspended from high school because we can't have a naysayer in the group. That'd be a terrible, terrible thing. So the remainder of this movie is effectively back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Everybody just trying to chisel their way into this election. And there's a lot of things happening. Probably the biggest thing is there's an evening in the high school where a bunch of the campaign posters and things get shredded, and and who's to be blamed for it. And of course, everybody gets called in. And again, Paul's our lovable doofus. I can't believe somebody would do that. And, just all these things that happen. Watching it, the funniest part of it for the whole movie is as you watch it and you see things happen and things progress, functionally, especially at the school, the status quo doesn't ever seem to change. The shitty people make shitty decisions. They get a shitty result, with the exception of our adorable doofus, Tammy and Lisa Flick, or not Lisa Flick, Tracy Flick. So it's amazing to watch that we have this group of adults that are overseeing these kids. All these terrible decisions are made. For the most part, the adults' lives are in fucking shambles. And all of the kids basically walk away unscathed. From there, I'll let my buddy Clark pick up, honestly, wherever you'd like and whatever you think is a good place to start. You know, we don't have to do a scene-by-scene breakdown, but there's so many little moments in this movie that are so worthy of talking about. I'll let you pick your first one, and we'll go from there.
Well, yeah, I will say you kind of hit on an overarching theme there. I think that isn't necessarily, it's not hitting you in the face with this movie, but I think it is also an overarching theme, which is, like you said, the adults are all miserable in this movie, and the kids kind of just get off scot-free for basically everything, and it all kind of generally works out for them, and they're all dumb. In the coda, especially at the end of this movie, you really see it, because the kids get everything they want. Tracy technically does go into Washington. She goes to Georgetown. She's miserable at Georgetown. She never makes friends, but she does end up being an aide to a representative in Congress and stuff like that. She gets what she wants in the end, and that's the friends she really wants. Is she wants to get to Congress. She wants to be a woman in Congress. That's her whole thing. She talks about writing to all these like powerful women, and how did you get as far as you did, and, earlier in the movie. So she gets what she wants technically at the end of the movie. It takes her a while. She gets there. Paul technically gets what he wants. Yeah, he's not going to be an athlete forever, but he goes to a frat and he ends up throwing big parties, themed parties, because he mentions that if he was if he had got elected school president, he would have thrown these themed parties and things like that, themed events. And so he ends up getting into a fraternity and throwing themed fraternity parties. So he gets what he wants to. It's like lovable doofus thing. And then Tammy gets what she wants. And I called this as soon as I saw it, when they were just like, her punishment, quote unquote, was getting sent to Catholic school. I'm like, oh God, she's going to get everything she wants now, because she's going to go to a repressed Catholic school. And she's, so for those who do not know, she is lesbian in the movie, which is hilarious. There's so much narration in this movie too, which kind of put me off at first. And then later I was kind of like, well, it makes the movie make sense, because like you said, when you look at it as a dark comedy and you don't take it too seriously, you're like, okay, this much narration is okay. Normally this much narration would really put me off on a movie though. But but it's like everybody has to pause, like freeze frame, and then talk about what's going on in their life. And there's so much of that in this movie. And but she explains early on, obviously she is in love with Lisa, and it's almost creepy how much. That's the other thing, is like, even Tammy, I think, is not lovable because of how much she's just like, oh my God, like her love notes and stuff, where she's just like, if you were to die, I would mix myself up in my dad's cement truck and get poured onto your grave. Like things like that. Like, she's not a good character either. Like, all these people are very punchable. So,
yes,
like,
absolutely.
Everybody in this movie is a punchable face. They are not great characters. But it is funny that the kids all get what they want. So I think Tracy gets what she wants. She finally makes it to Congress, as an assistant and an aide, I guess, to a representative. Paul gets what he wants. He just goes to, frat, and he gets to have a good time and throw themed parties. And Tammy gets to go to Catholic school, and she basically has a free range to do what she wants. She meets the love of her life, and they're like smoking weed in the bathroom together and all that stuff. And it's like, she gets her kind of, you would think Catholic school would be super strict, and it's actually her, like, basically do what you want free card.
It's paradise.
To be herself. So everybody kind of gets what they want as far as the kids. And then They kind of want you to think that with the adults, but I mean, no, Dave doesn't get a good ending. What, Dave's punching cards at like a Costco or something at the end? I don't know what the
Yeah,
what the
he's working
story
at a hardware store and living in his parents' basement. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's just so depressing. Well, the one note that I will say is with Mr. McAllister, they do try to give him what he wants because he's always dreamed of going to New York, and he's ends up working at I think it's the Natural History Museum, something like that. And it seems like, okay, maybe things didn't turn out that bad, but they give you that cautionary tale that be careful what you wish for, because he's living in a shoebox apartment where the toilet is right next to the oven, and all these kind of things. And so maybe he is happy, and maybe that's all he needs to be happy. But going to another place, especially a place like New York that's so expensive and everything, it's like it might not be all it's cracked up to be. But it seems like they do. Mr. McAllister, it seems like, is the one where they try to give you a little bit of a bone to at the end because of the adults in this. I mean, you feel bad for his wife, right? His wife, other than the whole movie, they're trying to get pregnant. So she is super stressing him about this, and the worst dirty talk I've ever heard in my life.
Oh my God. I can't. I refused. I will not show this to my girlfriend. I cannot. If I ever, because I know if I show it to her, she'll jokingly say that to me, and I will never unhear that. We're not going to say the line. We're not going to say the line. Watch the movie. Listeners, watch the movie if you want to know what we're talking about. I refuse to say this line.
It's so good, but I'll go with you. I'll go with you. Not do it. So anyway, so I mean, so his wife is probably the most innocent character in the movie, but the way she harangues him about this, like, it makes you not like her a little bit. Dave's ex-wife Linda completely seduces Jim, and then once it happens, goes crawling to his wife and rats on him. So she's not very likable. Dave obviously is not likable for the obvious reasons. So it's really funny that they give you this pool of characters and everyone's basically unlikable. But I think with Mr. McAllister, he's the only one, at least from the election point of view, where there's a little piece of you that can understand why he did what he did. Not whether it was right or wrong. That's a different discussion, but you can understand why he did it. As far as him having a tryst and as far as his buddy sleeping, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's just basically inexcusable, but that's like the one thing where it's like, yeah, this student of his is really kind of a brat, so you can kind of see it. But I don't know. Anyway, so we've somehow magically jumped to the ending and not covered all the wonderful things that happened in the middle of this movie. But yeah, it's still one that I think everybody should watch because it's really well made. It does tell a good story. It's dark, but it's also very funny. So overall, it's a really entertaining movie to watch. So shying away from our teenagers just for a second in talking about, Dave being divorced by Linda, and then how Jim ends up kind of being the guy that, fixes her gutters and replaces her light bulbs and is mowing her lawn. It's like, as an adult, the one reason I can sort of forgive Jim for what he did is that everybody in the situation, up to and including his wife, set him up for it. They completely set him up for it. You put two adults in a situation together long enough, things happen. It's human nature. People are stupid and they can't help themselves, But then at the same time, when the first thing she does is go rat to him, he comes home, walks in the house, and just sees the two sitting in the living room, and he's like, just kind of nods his head and just leaves. And it's like, there's a piece of me that thinks that he was looking for a way out, and he knew that that's what it was. And so he was going to do it regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether he got Linda or not. He was like, this is my way to, to break the monotony of what I'm in right now. But it's a little bit of that, and it's a kitschy term, but the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, right? The reality is it's not. It's just different. It's just
what it is. Yeah.
It's just different fucking grass. That's all it is, But sometimes there's people that are, just yearning for that, and they'll do anything to try to get it.
Yeah, and they describe it really well in his narration, because if you think about it, it's leading up to it in not just, so there's two parts here. In the very beginning of the movie, he talks about how he really enjoys being a teacher. Like he's like making a difference in these people's lives. He actually was cheering on the sports teams. Like he liked being a part of that teacher culture thing, and he took it seriously. And then I think with his best friend and the Tracy thing, that's why I call it a butterfly effect of shitty decisions. And I jokingly told you, I said, if a pedophile flaps his wings, is there a tsunami in Japan? Because that's what I feel like. I feel like that's because if his best friend hadn't have started with that, does it ever plant the seed that starts his own, I guess, mistrust in everything, or his own doubts in his own life? Because I think everything was running perfect as according to plan in his own mind until his best friend sleeps with Tracy, the teacher student thing. Because and before you interject, I'll finish the thought here. So he is super content with everything going on in his life at the beginning, but then midway in the movie, after all this stuff is starting to go awry, that's when he starts talking about his relationship with Diane, right? It's Diane, not Diana. I guess Diane.
Diane is his wife. Linda is
yes. I couldn't remember if it was Diana or Diane.
Dave's ex-wife, but it's Diane. Yep.
Diana. Okay. So he's talking about his relationship with Diana, and he's saying, like, there was always a reason we never tried to get pregnant. I needed to get my master's degree. She needed to finish whatever school she was in. We needed to get a bigger house. We needed to get this, and they keep putting off kids. And then when they start trying to have kids, it becomes a chore. It doesn't become fun anymore. You're not having sex. You're having sex for a purpose, not having sex because you enjoy it. And that's when he starts disconnecting and things like that. And that's a very relatable thing, I think, for adults. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, yeah, you will get into that mindset, and I think young people don't realize that too. That will happen. Like, you try to put career before family, and then all of a sudden, when you're trying to get a family, that can very much kind of interfere with that. So, yeah, I mean. Yeah, I can kind of agree with that, but at the same time, infidelity, that's where it leads to. I mean, yes, I can see that happening as well, but once again, we're looking at these characters through an outside, we're looking at them in the globe. So I don't know if I don't want to judge them, but at the same time, choices are made. So.
Well, I mean, and from 1999 to today, I think infidelity on the whole is viewed much differently. I don't think people take being married as seriously as they once did. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're in an unsustainable relationship with somebody and you're married to them and you want to leave, do what you have to do. I mean, do what you have to do. But I'm also a firm believer, and if you want to start something else, that's fine. Finish the one thing first, then start the new thing. That's just... like, it's a pretty basic equation. I understand it. I know you understand it. It's very straightforward, and I don't think people care about that anymore. And you can say it's for whatever reason. I mean, I'll honestly tell you that I don't know what the reason is, but I just don't think people in general take relationships very seriously anymore, and people just want to, go out and hook up and party and have fun. And I mean, if you're in your 20s, hey, go for it, right? Just go out, just do whatever you're doing. Practice safe sex. Try not to have bastard children. I mean, just do all the things that make sense. But there does get to be a point when you've chosen one person, you know, nobody wants to ever say this out loud, but accept this fact. When you choose one person, there are certain limitations you're imposing on yourself. And it's that one person physically forever until you make a change, an actual change. But I think that one thing this movie does really well is it shows you the nature of dreaming, because we all do it. You know, we all, the girl at the coffee shop, or, you know, the guy at the hardware store, or whatever, we all do it, right? It's to say that we don't, people are just fooling themselves. It's, you know, people of both sexes, I think, honestly spend equal amounts of time walking past a person and going, you know, I think it's just natural. But in the end, what this movie shows is what you do about that matters, you know, and that there are steep consequences to it. This movie didn't try to sugarcoat any of it, and it didn't try to give you and it all worked out in the end. It's like, no, everybody here ended up fucking divorced. You know, one lady divorced with a brand new baby, and it's like, that's not a good situation. But I think people live in a world now that's so fast paced that repercussions are seldom thought of. And I like that this movie just puts them right in your face.
Yeah, it happens real quick. And also, like I said, people might watch this movie and think Linda's a bitch, and I don't think she is. He kind of presented it first, and it was very obvious. And she picked up on that, and then, she kind of backtracked, and he was in the wrong. Do you think Linda is in the wrong in that? I mean, kind of to a degree, maybe, but I think generally, like, yeah, I don't know, really. Linda's maybe one of the more innocent people in this movie. Diana's the most innocent person in this movie, honestly. She's the only one that gets shit on. As far as major characters, she's the only one that gets shit on that you can't really hate for any reason other than her her really terrible sex talk. Her dirty talk is terrible. Other than that, there's nothing really to hate Diana on. I mean, I even think the principal and the kid that's the counter and the janitor, like, everybody's kind of a dick in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for Linda, now I know that I understand that we're supposed to see her as this freshly divorced and damaged, and all these things happen to her, and she's, you know, because what they're trying to revisit here is this effectively the same thing that Dave did, just not with a student. They're trying to make us think that Jim preyed upon her, in her weakened state and etc. And to be perfectly honest, I don't agree with that. I think it's one of those things that once it happened and she had time to think about it, she maybe thought better of it, but well, okay, too late. You were there too, you know? So the thing that I don't get is why Diane didn't punch Linda in the face for sleeping with her husband, you know?
True.
And she just put her on a couch and cried with her. And it's like, well, like, I know you're all friends and everything, but I don't know that that's how that would go. I mean, I suppose if you come in with a great sob story and he preyed upon me and I didn't mean for it to, but I mean, that's what anybody's going to say. I didn't mean for it to happen. It wasn't my, I mean, so that's just human nature. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of disdain for Linda, but I think she was party to what happened. And
yeah. I'm going to retract that statement and say, fuck Linda. She kind of actually is just like, I suspected that he might, and then I tried it and it happened. She's definitely party to that.
Well, and so, one more person of the shittiest of shit people that effectively got off scot-free for it. So, yeah. You know, she got the sympathy of the woman whose husband she slept with. That's getting off scot-fucking-free to me. Just an opinion. Possibly an unpopular one, but just an opinion.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, that's there. There's not very many redeemable people in this movie. Like I said, Paul might be the nicest guy in the movie, and his only downfall is that he's entitled, but he's also a lovable doofus. Like I said, he just doesn't do anything egregious towards, like he's not bad negative towards anyone. In fact, he's the opposite. He's just like he's literally Mr. Magooing his way through fucking high school, and he just happens to have all of the talent, the looks, and the backing of a rich family, and he happens to be the popular child of his family. Like he just has all the stuff going for him, but he doesn't, he's not reveling in it. He's just kind of rolling around being like, hey, hey guys.
Yeah,
He even doesn't vote for himself. In fact, and see, that's the thing about terrible. So we can get back into plot for a second. Terrible decisions made by terrible people. If he had just voted for himself, he would have won the election outright. And
correct. So, okay, so
too nice of a guy to do that, even.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, well, you said use the word talent. I don't think he has any talent. I just think he has buckets of lucky charisma is what he has. And there are people that maybe for them that's a talent, but that's what he has. So to Clark's point and the plot point, we finally have this election. And Mr. McAllister, being the civics teacher, is in charge of the election. And he's got our lovable Larry helping him out doing the vote counting. And so we'll call it the council counts the votes first, and they find that Tracy is the winner. And this is again after Paul goes into the voting booth and for some reason in good conscience can't vote for himself, and he votes for Tracy. So she wins the election by 1 vote. So Larry does his count. He gives the ballots to Mr. McAllister to do his count. But in the meantime, Tracy walks by in the hallway and looks in at Larry and kind of gives him the, what do you think? And he just kind of it wasn't Larry, it was the other kid that very shyly gives her the thumbs up. And she starts, of course, jumping up and down in the hallway. And Mr. McAllister, out of the corner of his eye, sees this. So he very casually takes 2 of the I voted for Tracy ballots and crumples them up and puts them in the garbage. And he's like, Larry, we've got a problem. And I think one of the things I find so incredible about this is that there are so many times in this movie where they have to have these big summits of people that come together to talk about these things. And there's 2 or 3 students and 14 adults in the room, and they're having these big, finally the election is kind of certified and Paul won. But then we have that dastardly janitor that finds the 2 crumpled up ballots in the garbage, and then we have yet another summit of people that all come together. And this is where things basically come apart for Mr. McAllister. And he's, it's a big scandal. It's in the local newspapers, teacher fixes elections. And maybe the funniest part about, 2 things in this movie, I think, with Tammy being the third party. I mean, come on, that's got Ross Perot written all over it, right? But then another, we'll call it, I don't know, pop culture reference, is that there was actually, so in 1992 at a high school in Wisconsin, a pregnant student was elected homecoming queen, but the staff announced a different winner and then burned the ballots to cover it up because they did not want people idolizing a pregnant young lady as their homecoming queen. So a piece of it's based on that too. So as far as who wrote this and why, there's a couple of real life examples that, have been noted as the inspiration for the movie. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it.
I also want to point out the janitor's vendetta is because Mr. McAllister dropped Chinese food at the beginning of the movie.
Threw it on the floor and didn't pick it up. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's one of those, they do a really good job in this movie of letting you know that everyone excuse me, everyone has like a little bit of power, and everyone has a little bit of dirt on everybody, and it's just about when they choose to use it, you know? And you talked earlier about, well, what if Dave had not banged his student? Would all this had happened? Well, what if Mr. McAllister had picked up the Chinese food and put it in the trash? Well, what would have happened? You know, what if Paul was just a lovable doofus we know he is, and had just voted for himself, like a lovable doofus probably would just vote for himself because he wouldn't think any better of it, you know? So there's all these. It's like reading one of those old school. I can't think of the name, but do you remember the books where you got to pick a decision and then you pick the decision?
Choose your own path.
Choose your own adventure. Choose your own adventure books. Exactly. So it's kind of like that, and it gives you all these moments of like, what could have happened? I mean, and we're choosing sort of the alternate adventure, right? Like nothing bad would have happened. And so I think it's completely legitimate to say that, but it is so funny when they get to the last summit of people and everyone's in there, and Tracy Flick's mom is in there, and there's the janitor giving him the stink eye, and Larry's in there like, Mr. McAllister, I couldn't believe, I can't believe you do this. Because, and so he has to go through all of this shit. He has to go through all of it. And just prior to this election is when Mr. McAllister effectively gets busted for kind of what he did. But then one of the beautiful uses of why the hell not in this movie is that he has this tryst with Linda. She says, get that hotel room. And he does all that, but then she doesn't show up. He drives to her house, and then one of the funniest parts of this movie is that he gets stung right on the eyelid by a bee.
The bee sting is hilarious.
And it's such a stupid little plot point. It's like almost non-existent, but it factors into the rest of the movie. Because as things get worse for him, as the movie goes on, the condition of his eye gets progressively worse too. And you could call it cheap, like a cheap movie stunt. Like this is how I'm gonna show you progression. But I don't view it like that. I view it like, yeah, when you're having a bad fucking day, everything's gonna go to hell, right? And just, a bee sting on the eye. I took one right in the middle of my lip once, and I swear to God, I looked like Elvis for a month, And so there's a piece of it where I can really relate to it, and it's like, it just makes it that much funnier.
Well, that's another thing too. This movie does a really good job with its restraint on profanity. It kind of surprises you. Like it actually is impactful when there is something that has nudity, like the porn scene at the very beginning, or like when Dave at the very beginning, like the movie starts off like you have like 4 minutes of just narration and like lead in, and then out of nowhere he drops like her pussy gets so wet, and it's just like, what the fuck, where did that come from? Like I was like, what am I watching? Like it legitimately shocked me. I was like, what the hell? Like and then like you have the porn scene, like and it'll be quiet, and you have the porn scene, it'll be quiet for a long time, and then when he gets the bee sting, like he drops profanity, like very funny profanity that you would drop if you got stung in the eye by a bee. But the movie, it actually, like I said, it kind of restrains itself from being overtly dirty. Like it when it drops it's shocking. It comes out of nowhere, and you're just kind of like taken aback by it, and you're like, you almost have to laugh because you're like, I did not see that coming. So yeah, I kind of applaud the movie in being a dark comedy that restrains itself in its profanity.
Well, yeah, it's functionally a high school tale, but also not a high school tale, right? Not your typical high school tale, especially with the involvement with the teacher. But I think you're absolutely right, because there's a lot of moments in this where you have to, like, you kind of do a second take, like, what? Like, did I just hear that right? And it's like, yeah, you just heard it right. And there are so many just little I don't know. Like I love Tracy Flick's like building anger through the whole thing. Like there's something about that. And when she goes off and shreds all the posters and then is like, oh shit, what did I do? Um, it's like I think for anybody who knows a person like that that is wound so tight and they have like this singular focus and there's just one thing that they're always doing. It's like in the back of your mind, you're always saying, boy, that person's going to snap one day. And in this case, she completely snaps, but at the same time, it's portrayed as disastrous, but at the same time, fairly innocuous. She shredded some posters. Okay. She didn't shoot up the school or do anything like that, you know? So it's, while she loses it and goes completely berserk, you can still laugh at it a little bit because it's like, well, yeah, you saw the snap coming, and when it finally happens, it leans more towards the funny side of things than, you know, call it the violent side of things, which I think is another thing this movie does really well. And there's a lot of moments in this movie where somebody could have very justifiably punched somebody else in the face. And you would have been like, you had that coming. And they don't ever do that. You know, I don't know why exactly. I mean, if anything, maybe Tammy punching Paul would have been the only one where you would have been like, because of the kind of girlfriend stealing, maybe that one would have been maybe the most just if it had happened.
See, I didn't even think that's justified because Paul is so innocent and doesn't realize it. I don't even think he even sees his sister's sexuality. Like he doesn't understand it. He does not see it. Like, because he walks in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're probably right. The lovable doofus has no idea that a girl would like another girl, and
yeah, him getting punched wouldn't do anything because he'd be like, he wouldn't know what he did wrong.
No, I think you're probably right about that. So, yeah, okay, I'll retract that. I think you're probably right. I'll keep the statement that I think the movie did a good job of, because it would have been really easy for a lot of these situations for somebody to resort to some sort of violence, you know, and whether it just be a fist fight or something else, and they do give you a black puffy eye at the end of it. It's just not because somebody got punched. It's because of a bee sting, which is, it sort of makes Mr. McAllister's pain very, very transient. So you can kind of feel it. Because, I mean, who hasn't been stung by a bee, right? And the second you see it, if you didn't automatically go, oh, God, and to cover your eye just instinctively, I mean, it happens to me every time I watch this movie. I just cover my eye and think, like, Jesus, that would just be awful. I think, well, to be honest, I think that we have covered a lot of the main plot points. And I think without dissecting it down to its nitty gritty, I think we can probably find ourselves getting, you know, to the end. Mr. McAllister's downfall, obviously. The ballots are discovered. He's forced to resign. His wife divorces him and basically takes everything. But on the bright side, you know, he leaves the Nebraska town where they live, and he ends up in New York and becomes a tour guide from I think it's the National History Museum, and begins dating one of his museum coworkers. Now, their little bit of interaction, honestly, to me, looked dry as a piece of toast. So I don't, or a piece of unbuttered toast. How about that? And so, but it seems like he's sort of happy. But at the same time, they also do show you his little tiny, tiny apartment where I think it's that. I honestly feel like that's the be careful what you wish for moment, because there's a dark side to reality. And they show us our friend Paul, who goes to the University of Nebraska without Lisa because she dumped him because he didn't win the election. You know, and Paul's just having frat parties and doing keggers, and just his charisma is just doing what it does, and it's leading him to success. Tammy, our only close to likable character, does end up at an all-girls private Catholic school, which, to your point, you'd think would be a little more structured, but apparently not. You know, and I guess I've heard enough about Catholicism where I can see it maybe being a stretch to call it structured, organized, and disciplined. But it seems like Tammy's kind of getting what she wants, and she's happy. And then, to what you said earlier, Tracy attends Georgetown, but she clearly does not get along with people, and she's pretty isolated because she's very goal oriented and just wants to achieve this thing. And I think this is maybe one of the interesting parts, because they make a point of this, that she's very taken aback when she finds out that most of her classmates got into this because of their connections. So it sort of takes her back to, like, I think the election, where it's like things are just happening because of your popularity or because of who you know. And through another one of those little inner monologues, she does talk about missing Dave's intellect and how smart he was, and she wonders if he ever became the novelist he wanted to be. And the movie very quickly depicts that Dave did not get what he wanted. They show him with a price gun marking prices on various goods and sundries at a hardware store, and that he's living with his parents. So that might be the saddest thing, but also the person that probably deserved it the most. So maybe that's okay. Now, the very end of the movie, I think I'm going to let you cover this, because you did me the grand gesture of watching this, but I fucking love the end of this. I just love it.
Okay, so picking up where you left off, we get Matthew Broderick's character, Mr. McAllister, his kind of obviously they show like how much his rent cost in his little apartment, and he's like, oh, I get to teach again. He's working at the Natural History Museum, and students, when they do field trips, he has to be there to guide them through and do all that stuff. And he goes on a vacation to Washington. I think it's for a trip or something. He's in Washington, and he's like, oh, well, I did see Tracy once again. And it's her getting into a limousine. Like he catches a glimpse of her as he's walking down the street with a representative from Nebraska, which I had to look this up, because I was like, for a second, I was like, was this a real representative? Like, I thought there might be like a fun, cheeky political scandal thing that they threw in, but apparently no, this is a fake. It's a fake representative from Nebraska, but she becomes an aide to a representative from Nebraska, and you kind of see her giving eyes and doing this stuff, and then she kind of shoots eyes toward the camera, which is kind of giving you a clue that, like, looking at Matthew Broderick's character as he is narrating, and he kind of goes through his head being like, well, my life was so happy now, everything's going great, but and he kind of reverts back to like, this bitch was the cause of all my problems. And as the limousine's pulling away, he hurls his it's his drink or his milkshake, whatever he has in his hand, at the back window of this limousine, and they stop and get out, and I guess their Secret Service gets out, and they're like, hey, and he has to go sprinting away. And that's his whole thing. Like, it builds up that anger. Like, as soon as he sees her, it like builds it up again. He's just like, yeah, this was the cause of all my problems. So shows you that sometimes, vendettas just don't go away. So is that a suitable way to say that's how the movie concludes?
Well, there's one more little piece, and that's when he's back at a museum, and he's saying all these things to all these kids, and then when he asks if there's any questions.
Oh gosh! Yes. Yes. Okay.
The super eager little girl in the front with her hand up, just going, and he's instantly brought all the way back to the high school, because that's kind of where we meet.
Yeah, he realizes there is always going to be Tracy flicks in the world. Mm-hmm. There's always, so you're not going to get past it. There's always going to be those Tracy flicks. So yeah, the little girl that's way too eager to answer when nobody else is volunteering or knows the answer even. Yeah, he's immediately triggered kind of by it, and he's like, anyone? He's purposely ignoring the girl that has her hand up way too enthusiastically, because he sees a Tracy flick in this little girl. So.
Now, interestingly enough, this movie did have an alternate ending. but apparently it was really poorly received by test audiences, so they changed it. But as I understand, it's very, very faithful to the book. So instead of him leaving for New York and becoming effectively a tour guide, he stays in Omaha and he's hired on as a used car salesman by one of his former students. So that would be fun. And apparently Tracy encounters him while looking to buy a car, and the two settle their differences before she asks him to sign her yearbook. There's a piece of me that kind of thinks that might have been fun, but I don't think it was anywhere near as good as the ending that we got.
No, I wouldn't like that. I mean, there is a nod to it because she does say about how, like, being elected council president, she would think that she would have like lots of friends, but nobody signed her yearbook. So there is a mention of the yearbook.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't really like that ending. I like how it is.
Yeah. And, getting to the end too, and especially when she's getting in the congressman's limousine and she has that look on her face, to me, it once again reinforces not the answer, but the question of when she had the relationship with Dave, who was actually the predator.
Right.
So it's like,
well, it's made mention several times. He even says, like, how many people are you going to step over to get to what you want? Mr. McAllister even says that to her at one point, and you can see that that's her thing. She's writing, she's getting the advice from her mom. She's writing all these letters to other, successful politician women and all this stuff. And it's like, she constantly talks in her inner monologues about being like, you have to work twice as hard. You have to be, kind of ruthless and all this kind of stuff, which, I mean, yeah, technically every successful millionaire, most, I won't say everyone, but a majority of the successful, like, billionaires that you see in the world, yeah, they have that mentality. They had to step on other people's necks to get to where they were. But I find that, interesting that that's kind of a thing at the beginning that, yes, Dave is not in the right by any stretch of the imagination, and there's no way to defend him. But like you're saying, predator kind of thing, she was always going to step over whoever she could to get to where she needed to be and use whoever she wanted. So I find that fascinating at the end when she's just like, oh, I wonder if Dave's happy. I wonder if he ever finished this novel. Does she really care? Or is it like a narcissism thing where she's just like, oh, well, I hope everything worked out for him. He was just a stepping stone, though.
Well, and they kind of don't really tell you. I think they leave it a little open-ended, so you can kind of think whatever you want to think. But at the same time, it's like when it lends you that thought that she might be more predator than prey, and it's like, who else is she going to crush in the meantime? It's like, it leaves me with that thought that this congressman has no idea what he's heading into. Like, I mean, that's the next person she's going to bring down as a congressman. Because if you think about it, this movie wasn't made too long after, we almost had a president get brought down by an aide. So
right.
It's like, well, okay. So, I mean, but that again goes to, and this is just me being the realistic, unfeeling bastard that I am, that, in any situation you're in, if you're in the situation, if you walk into the room, if you close the door, you've got some level of culpability. You just do. Whether people want to admit it or not, I think, this movie probably hasn't aged well because now we definitely live in a time of everybody's a victim of something. And I don't personally subscribe to that mentality. But I think it is what it is. So probably a reason this movie never had a part 2, because I think in a part 2 she would have had some consequences for, her part in whoever's downfall. But it could have been interesting. Maybe we should write Election 2 and submit our screenplay, and Tracy Flick gets assassinated or something, just because so somebody finally gets some comeuppance.
Yeah, I don't know where to even start with that one. Yeah, definitely though, she's I get that vibe at the end that it's not just, oh, she finally became an aide. Like the look she's giving the representative, she's like definitely trying to sleep with him or get ahead or do something. Yeah. So,
Climb
and
up
that's
one more step.
exactly. That's just another dark level to this movie. So, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they purposely don't at the very beginning. They kind of give you that feeling that maybe she was at some level at fault with. She was also into Dave, because she does say like, oh, she was interested in him and everything, but it doesn't go through the entire movie until the end there, where you once again is kind of insinuated that she's probably sleeping with this representative, or maybe that's how she got the job or got that position or something like that. So like, I like how there's an insinuation that she's using her sexuality to get to places, but at the same time, it's never actually overtly just brought out. You never see her sleep with anyone. You never see her say anything to anyone. You never see her come on to anyone. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, because even with Dave at the beginning, she's just like sipping a beer, kind of just looking kind of naive and demure kind of thing. Just like, they never actually show her doing anything that says that she is using sexuality as a weapon or a tool or anything like that. It's just kind of insinuated. And it's only at the beginning and the end of the movie. But it's kind of a theme throughout the movie that because Mr. McAllister kind of holds it against her, that he kind of looks at her as like, a little trollop or whatever, like it's like, oh, you caused my best friend to lose his job and wreck his marriage. And then that subsequently wrecks my marriage. And that subsequently, like I said, the butterfly effect. So I find that funny that they never just put it on screen. They just insinuate it.
Yeah, they definitely have her, especially early in the movie, being the one who is led down a path, right? And then they try to give you, I think when they show her getting in the limousine, they try to give you that starry-eyed girl again. But then she has that look, and that look just shatters the starry-eyed thing. Like, you know exactly what you're doing. So, yeah. Well, I don't know. To the Tracy Flicks of the world, yeah. Well, keep doing what you're doing, because eventually you'll start a corporation, and I might get a job there, and I'll be happy. Overall, my buddy Clark, what'd you think of this one? Was it a worthy watch?
This was a very strange watch for me. I feel like we kind of jokingly always talk about the movie Ravenous, which is one of my favorite movies, about it being like misunderstood as being, it's a dark comedy, misunderstood as a horror movie. And I think I didn't know what I was actually getting into when I watched this, but it's a dark comedy that's, I think, misunderstood as like trying to be an American Beauty knockoff, like I said earlier. Like, so yeah, I mean, if I watched it 2 more times, I might even pick up more and more out of it. The first time I watched it, I kind of, like I said, I could not wrap my head around what the screenplay, like whoever wrote the screenplay for this, I didn't know what they were trying to get at. I didn't know what the message was supposed to be, because it's depressing. And every character in this movie is punchable. Like I said, it's depressing almost. And it's washed out. Even its color. I think they spent all the budget on getting Matthew Broderick, Reese Witherspoon, and Chris Klein. And, like they just like, it's a washed out movie. I don't know if they did that on purpose to make it bleak and kind of gray the whole time. But I mean, even by 1999 standards, it's not a vibrant movie. It's I don't know. It's such a strange watch. I would encourage people to watch it just to see it. I think it's well acted because it has a great cast, but it's good actors playing really shitty characters. So, And I think they're intentionally written that way. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, okay, I can't knock the screenplay. I think it's meant to be this way. And I think the people acted it the way it was meant to be acted, because I can't see these people half-assing this. It looks like they did a good job, but they definitely acted the shit out of bad characters. If that makes any sense.
No, I think it does, and I think you're noticing that they spent way too much of the budget on tweed, especially for some of the ladies that had brown tweed skirt. I didn't get that at all, but I think that was, to your point, like, if there's a message in this movie, to me, the message is, for the most part, life sucks. Do your best to get through it. Think about this and make decent decisions. You know, if you don't, be prepared for real world consequences. And that for most of us, life is not shown through a bright, sunshiny lens. For most of us, it's spends a lot of time on the bleaker side, you know, paying bills and doing all the other shit that we don't want to be doing. But like, you know, maybe live more like Paul Metzler and just, you know, go through life and enjoy it. And when you have a fun moment, make it a fun moment and make the best of it, and know that tomorrow you got to rinse and repeat. You know, it's just how it is. Well, okay. I think your assessment is fair. I will obviously say that I love this movie. I think it's just fantastic. I did want to mention really quickly, from our first episode, we had a couple of listener comments that I thought were worthy to repeat. The first one is somebody who's not in our Discord, but messaged me directly and said, I'm 50 minutes into Reel to Reel. I'm digging it so far and can't wait to hear your, you know, top 30 for the year. That being said, I have to completely disagree with Clark on Bicentennial Man. The movie is great, and if you don't feel some emotions in the end, you're dead inside. Absolutely fucking dead.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you. Thank you, anonymous listener. Yes, I'm dead inside. I appreciate that.
Well, and so absolutely. So fair enough. And then the other one was from one of our members, but he said, Bowfinger was amazing. You are all mental. So
I can't imagine who that is.
Me either. But it was a comment, so I thought I would pass it along to everybody, because honestly, it was just kind of funny. So that worked for me. And it shows me that there's at least 2 people listening. So yay us.
Awesome.
So heading into week 4, that's going to be where we pick or we choose and talk about the voter's choice. So do us all a favor, get into our Discord, look at, go to the Reel to Reel channel and scroll up a ways, and you will see the very top thing is we need your vote. So you need to pick one of the 6 movies there. Hopefully not one of Clark's, but that's okay if we do. I mean, but still, like, hopefully not one of Clark's. Don't pick number 3, obviously, because that's the election and we just talked about it. So let's not do that. That was my way of kind of slipping in one of my favorites, because this whole week 3 thing is paying off for me. But so please do that. And if nothing else, the next time we'll get together, we'll be effing weird, and we'll definitely get real. Anything else to add to the conversation, Clark?
No, I do want to say, just as a coda to this, take a lesson from Tammy and Paul and Tracy. All of them are kind of dumb at the end of the day, even though they are kind of blissful in where they end up. So, and you can see that in Tammy's prayer, Paul's kind of outro, and Tracy's, I guess, where she ends up. So they all end up kind of in a place, but that doesn't make them any better people.
Well, if you work hard or don't give a shit, you might find yourself in a place where you're being blown by your sister's ex-lesbian girlfriend while the student body president is banging a congressman. So just work hard and everything will work out in the end.
That's how we keep it real, kids.
All right. Good night, everyone.